right. So what I want to talk about today is the minhagim of Purim. If you think about it, Purim is really one of the few holidays, I think, which are really defined by the minhagim, meaning certain holidays like Pesach, the Seder and Matzah, that defines the day. That's what we think about as Pesach, getting rid of chametz. All that's like halach. That's like things in the Gemara, Shulchan Aruch, etc. If you think about maybe another holiday like Purim would be something like Shavuos. Shavuos doesn't have any mitzvos, and then basically what defines the day is our minhag to go and stay up all night. But that's not like a halacha. You don't have to stay up all night. If you think about Purim, a lot of what defines Purim as a unique day are the minhagim we have associated with it. So just a few examples which we've already seen are, for instance, that Tinus Esther. So we saw actually the whole fast is probably just a minhag. That seems to be the way that we paskin. The whole thing, in Megillus Tinus way back when, after Bayesheni, they were not allowed to fast. At some point that developed into a fast day, really just based on the way that our custom developed. The whole idea of machatzis shekel. Some people wear big day Shabbos on Purim. Others wear costumes, which we'll discuss today on Purim. A lot of the banging your feet at Haman during the Megillah. A lot of the day is defined by minhagim, which don't have necessarily an explicit source anywhere in Gemara, but which give the day the essence, the feel that it has. So one of those which I want to talk about today, and we'll see if we get to the second one, I want to discuss at least one, but are costumes, right? So people wear costumes. I don't know what the Jewish Center looks like, the proportion of people wearing costumes to not wearing costumes. I'll tell you here in YU, so the Megillah night, almost no one wears costumes, and then Megillah daytime, that's when everyone's already dressed up. Dr. Gribbets, do you get dressed up?
No.
No. Okay. Maybe next year. Maybe next year you'll get dressed up. Okay. I won't tell you what our costume is. I didn't get dressed up until I got married, and then I was told you got to get dressed up. So I've been, the first year we were married, I was a chassid, and my wife was chassidish also. She has cousins who are actually chassidish. So we called them up. It was a little bit of an awkward conversation. Hey, is it insulting if we ask you if we can borrow your clothes? And they're like, nah, of course, that's great. So anyways, we had quite legitimate outfits. People were doing double takes. But okay, so wearing costumes. So let me ask you, how far back do you think this minhag goes? Take a guess. 100 years, 200?
100 years.
100 years. Okay, so Rabbi Short says 100 years. Any other guesses? I'll give you a hint. It's further back. In the Mishnah, Gemara. Hey, we have another participant. Good morning.
Hello.
Hi.
When Mordechai was first born, we didn't know what costume to get him, so we gave him a T-shirt and said, "Hi, I'm Mordechai." And the guy, no, really, I'm Mordechai.
That's really funny. That's very good. Okay, so I'll it's not exactly clear. The first explicit mention of costumes, is in the 1400s. But in the 1400s, they're saying we have this minhag since time immemorial. So exactly, how many years it's been since before, then it's not exactly clear. No one is really writing it. If you look in like the Ramah on Shulchan Aruch, so he talks about costumes a little bit. He also talks about wearing big day Shabbos. Apparently many people, not apparently, but many people do get dressed up in their big day Shabbos on Purim. So why do they get dressed up in their big day Shabbos? So the Kaf HaChaim explains that it's inappropriate to be saying that Mordechai wore his big day Malchus. That's what we read in the Megillah, and we're dressed, like in our big day Chol, which is a little bit humorous and ironic because half the people are dressed like thing one and thing two. It's not exactly the most fitting for big day Malchus. But okay, so it goes back very, very early. Maybe another, basic follow-up question, which I've never really given too much thought to it. But what's behind this minhag? Anyone ever hear an explanation why are we getting dressed up in costumes?
Because everybody is in costumes in Megillah Esther. They're hidden. The real personalities were hidden.
Oh, so like Esther hid her personality, so too we hide our personality. Okay, good. So actually the earliest version of the minhag, people would actually wear a mask. So that fits nicely. Meaning you really don't even know who the person is. You really don't even know who the person is. I saw a couple other explanations. Anyone ever hear anything different?
Along those lines, the sort of the Hester Panim from Hakadosh Baruch Hu, he's never mentioned in the Megillah.
Good, right? Hakadosh Baruch Hu's hidden. Actually, that one I'm not even sure if I put that on the source sheet, but that answer I saw from Rav Moshe Chagiz from the early 1700s. He says that the same way that Hakadosh Baruch Hu was hidden from us, and he kind of acted as if he was going to. It's maybe slightly different, but Hashem acted as if we were going to be destroyed. So too, we put on a face, so to speak, about what's happening. Things aren't really exactly as they seem. A couple other explanations I'd heard of this one, actually, like it rung a bell when I saw this, but Vashti grew a tail or got saras. We're somehow commemorating that by changing our look. And that's what led to Esther becoming queen. I think I remember being taught that. And another one that like this general idea of V'nahafoku, that everything is backwards on Purim. So, maybe you become someone else altogether. Okay, so that's the basic background, I would say, to the minhag of dressing up in costumes. Specifically, what I want to talk about today, though, isn't just getting dressed up in costumes and the minhag, but the fact that many of the minhagim of Purim, and at least we'll discuss costumes, we'll see what else we get to, but the minhagim of Purim seem to violate halacha. It's not just, oh, we'll keep a minhag here, but some of them violate, seem to go against explicit halachos. And then there's a lot of discussion about, are they defensible, or are they not defensible? So the first part of the minhag of getting dressed up, apparently, I don't know, how many people do this. I think I've seen it a few times, but apparently it was normal, it was regular for people to cross-dress. So men would dress up like women, and women would dress up like men. Okay, I've seen men wear skirts on Purim. You've seen such things. You've seen the women be Superman. So what's the issue with that, right? What's the issue with cross-dressing? Not a trick question.
It's in the Torah.
Right. The Torah says, Lo Yilbash, actually don't know the pasuk, but we got to get Steve here. Lo Yilbash Gever Simlas Isha or something like that. Right? You're not allowed to go and wear women's clothes. Women aren't allowed to wear men's clothes. And the reason for that, the way that Rashi explains, is that we're worried it's going to lead to, people start thinking that one person is the opposite gender, to lead to inappropriate mixing, and who knows what's going to happen once people don't even know, what sex or gender the other person is. So the Mahari Mintz, we're going to see a lot from the Mahari Mintz today. Was the first one. He's really the first record of this minhag of cross-dressing. He's also the first reference to the minhag of wearing costumes in general. So the first tshuva we have on the topic, right? Why does a posek say put something down in record? Because he was asked, hey, isn't this problematic? Right? If people were wearing costumes for a long time and no one had any issues with it, so we don't have any record of it because no one was bothered by it. No one had anything to write. But the Mahari Mintz was asked, hey, people are cross-dressing. So how do you deal with that? So who was the Mahari Mintz? Just background, because he's going to be the main character in today's shir. So the Mahari Mintz was born in Germany. He ended up as the rabbi in Padua, which is in northern Italy, for almost 50 years. So he really held his stellar for a very long time. He died at over 100 years old. We have testimony from people that they met him, and you do the year calculation, you'll figure out he was over 100 years old when he died. All of his writings, he was a big Talmud Chacham. He was also into philosophy and other trades as well. He was Torah Umada kind of guy. But all of his writings were burned by non-Jews, besides for 16 chuvos. All we have from him is 16 chuvos, which are known as the Shut Mahari Mintz, the chuvos of Mahari Mintz. This one tshuva, meaning there's 16 of them, this one tshuva is his most famous, undoubtedly. This one gets quoted, a lot. It's about dressing up on Purim costumes. Again, it's the first reference, and it's also about cross-dressing, which the Ramah is going to quote in the Shulchan Aruch. Another one he talks about, just interestingly, I was peeking through it. Regularly when you see a sefer, you want to flip through it. So it takes a while to flip through a couple hundred chuvos. It's a little easier to flip through 16. But one of them he has, which is just interesting, is he talks a lot about Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni. Let's say you're born in Adar, and then your bar mitzvah is in a year where there's 2 Adars. So which month is your bar mitzvah, right? So Rabbi Levine's son Akiva right now, I think, is actually in Yerushalayim, because the way we paskin is that not until Adar Sheni, do you become a bar mitzvah? And that's based on the Mahari Mintz also. But he talks about, fun theoretical cases. You have twins who are born on, how's it go? If you have twins who are born in a year where there's 2 Adars, let's say the first child is born at the end of Adar Rishon, and the second twin is born at the very beginning of Adar Sheni, right? So he says, but then when the bar mitzvah comes, let's say it's a year where there's only 1 Adar. So the second child is actually going to have his bar mitzvah on the first day of Adar, and the first child isn't going to have his bar mitzvah until the end of Adar. So you have this very strange phenomenon that the firstborn actually is bar mitzvah second. And he says, but still the firstborn is going to get the bechors. It's got whatever. He deals with all these issues. Adar is a fun. Everything's got to be interesting with Adar. So he talks a lot about that. And so let's jump in. So he's discussing again. He was asked the question, hey, why is everyone cross-dressing? So if you look in your source sheets, I think that you don't have 1A. 1A was the explanation of why we get dressed up, like Mark said, by Rav Moshe Chagiz. We'll skip that. But let's just jump into the Mahari Mintz. So he's got a whole tshuva about this. This is a much longer tshuva. I took little excerpts out of it, and we'll learn some of the most relevant parts for us. So says the Mahari Mintz. He was asked, everyone's wearing costumes. Partzufim might mean masks. Everyone's wearing them, the young and the old. So why is it that the Gedolim and the biggest Talmidei Chacham of the generations, Zal, who I grew up with, so meaning he's referring to an earlier minhag. He's saying, my Rebbein used to see all of this happen. They used to see everyone dressing up in these different costumes. And men were wearing women's clothes and women were wearing men's clothes. So if it's true that there was actually something wrong with it, how could it be that my Rebbeim, who were such big tzaddikim, didn't just stay quiet and they weren't mocha, they never made any a tumult about it? But kol shekain b'kal v'chomer be'isser lav, and if it was really so bad, it's a lav in the Torah. So they should have said something, but I know that they didn't say something. So what's the story? It must be that they knew it was heter gomer. It must be that they knew it was okay. There's not even a thought that this is an avera. This is an interesting, historical piece over here. He says they were right that there's no problem. Unlike this, the thoughts of the palga, the person who makes problems, the bal machlokas, Utzdoki. I don't know if he was really at Stoki, but he's polemicizing over here. He says there's a person who's bal machlokes. He's at Stoki, which is like one of the worst insults you could give to someone at the time. He's not one of the rabbinic Jews. Umuchram, and he should be in Cherem. Gershom Bune Patsu. I don't know exactly what that is. There's one guy who's making problems though. He's saying everyone's terrible. Everyone's violating the halacha. He's thinking against and talking against the, such great tzaddikim, saying that people are doing things wrong. So he basically starts the tshuva by saying, it must be mutter because my Rebbeim saw all this. This is an old minhag, and no one's ever made any problems about it. So it must be mutter. Once that's the case, he now has to figure out, okay, why is it mutter, right? So someone once, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach once said that there's two different types of questions you can ask in halacha. The first question could be, is it mutter? The second question is, it must be mutter because everyone does it. Why is it mutter? And then when you have the second question, sometimes the answers are a little bit more stretched because we have to go and defend the minhag of Klal Yisrael. So in this case, we're doing the second. Okay. So that's how he starts. Now, his big proof that he thinks that it's okay is from a Tosfos. We're not going to see the whole thing inside, but maybe just as background, in the times of the Gemara, and it's actually even brought down in Shulchan Aruch, there's an isser for a man to go and look in a mirror. Believe it or not, we'll pause for a second just for this background. So a man's not allowed to look into a mirror in the Gemara's time. Why? Because men didn't look in mirrors. Mirrors at the times of, in the 500s, 600s, whatever it was something which only women would use. Women would use it to go and make sure they look beautiful. Men, I guess, didn't comb their hair. Men didn't care how they looked. So looking in a mirror was the same problem of Beged Isha. That's the background, actually. So nowadays, no one keeps that, but that's because men also use mirrors, meaning it's not something which specifically women use. I once read the biography of the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish was machmir for what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. So he, actually, I'm debating. It might have been the Stiper. It was either the Chazon Ish or the Stiper. Both of them were in the same biography. One of them was once walking by. One of their Talmidim was walking behind them, and they were looking downwards as they walked, and there was a full body mirror in front of them, and they looked up and they saw themselves and they jumped backwards because they thought that they were about to run into a person. Like they didn't even recognize that they were looking at themselves in the mirror because they'd never looked in the mirror before at 50, 60 years old. Anyway, so some people were machmir for this. This is not something which I'm telling you should be machmir. It also comes up by tefillin, by the way, that many people use a tefillin mirror to go and make sure that their tefillin are properly placed in the middle of their head. So the Sanzer Rav, the Divrei Chaim, has a whole tshuva saying this is terrible. It's a problem of lo yilbash. You shouldn't be using mirrors. And he's like Lishitaso in that tshuva. He says, first of all, your tefillin don't need to be in the middle of your head, so it doesn't matter anyways. And then once that's true, get rid of your mirrors. Mirrors are terrible things. So everyone else says, first of all, it does need to be in the middle of your head. So it's important. Second of all, there's no problem with mirrors nowadays, so don't worry so much about it. But so that's the background. So there's background that you're not supposed to use a mirror. The problem is that the Gemara says you are allowed to use a mirror in certain instances. So for instance, the Gemara says that if you're getting a haircut from an Ovid Avodah Zarah, who you would be worried at the time that, I guess they were on pretty bad terms with the Ovid Avodah Zarah, but you're worried the person's going to kill you. So apparently if you have a mirror that's going to help you somehow, it's going to help you see what's going on as you're getting a haircut. So you're allowed to use a mirror in that one instance. And then similarly, we can jump to this line over here. They would allow Rabban Gamliel to go and use a mirror at all times because he needed to look really good, because they were part of the Malchus. They were part of the, they were the royal entourage or whatever. So they had to go look good. So they were given special attention. But says Tosfos, this is all quote of a long Tosfos in Avodah Zarah. Umihu eno asur ki im lihisnaus. Tosfos says there's never a problem to use a mirror unless you're doing it in order to beautify yourself. The avar mishum lo yilbash gever. That's when it's a violation of lo yilbash gever. Aval lihistaper uligaleach. But if you're just getting a haircut or to shave, you're just trying, meaning when you're getting shaved and you're worried about your life, you have to somehow the mirror is going to help you protect yourself. You can see what's going on by the barber behind you. Omishum mechu shenaim, or you've got some sort of issue with your eyes, you need to go look in the mirror to go and fix them. Vadai mutter. Then you're allowed to use a mirror. You're allowed to use a mirror when you're doing it in order to prevent yourself from getting hurt, or when you're trying to give yourself a refu. So how do you ever know, how do someone know who's looking at you, whether you're doing it for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? So it's finishes ubochin libos yodea. The one who can tell what's in your heart, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows why you're looking in the mirror. So Tosfos says once in a while we do have exception, that if you're doing it not for the purposes of beautifying yourself, but you're doing it for the purpose of taking care of an issue, so then it's allowed. And then the Mari Mintz continues with another Tosfos, Mashma Tosfos Maharav Rabbeinu Shmuel b'Shem Rabbeinu Moshe. Similarly, if one's giving themselves a haircut, you're allowed to use you can imagine trying to give yourself a haircut without a mirror. So Tosfos says you're allowed to go and look in a mirror when you're giving yourself a haircut. Right? You've got a scissors, you've got a razor. It's not going to work out so well if you don't have a mirror to see how you're doing. It's only, again, here's the main line. It's only a problem when you do it for beautification or to adorn yourself, the same way that women use mirrors back in the time of the Gemara. So Ad Kan Lashon. So says the Mari Mintz, based on all this, what do we see? Alma Lahani Tosfos. According to these Tosfos, we see when it comes to something which men and women are doing the same, meaning both men and women need a mirror to go and give themselves a haircut. That's not something which, specifically one sex uses and not the other. Leis bei mishum lo yilbash. There's no problem of lo yilbash gever, and you could use a mirror in that instance. So what the Mari Mintz is basically saying is that as long as this is something which isn't intended for beautification, and he goes on to say, why do we do this on Purim? Why do we cross-dress on Purim? He says we're doing it because of simcha, brings people happiness when oh, you thought he was your friend, and it actually looks like, the woman you thought you knew, whatever. I'm saying like when people are looking the exact opposite gender, that apparently brings simcha on Purim. I guess when you see a guy wearing a skirt, sometimes that can come off as pretty funny. The guy you see in the base medrash, your chavrus or something like that. So he says that both the men and the women do. It's okay because it's not something which is specific to one sex. They're doing it equally. Anytime something is done equally, what you see from those Tosfos are that it is allowed. Good, just the argument. Fantastic. So if you look in the Ramah, right? So the Ramah actually quotes this Mari Mintz. Again, there's only 16 chuvos of the Mari Mintz, but almost all of them are quoted by the Ramah lehalacha. So the Ramah says over here, he mentions the minhag of wearing costumes. Right? Men and women cross dress. Ein iser b'davar. It's not a problem. It's okay because they're intending for simcha. They're not intending for any sort of beautification. That we're not really going to talk about today, but also people used to wear kilayim. I don't know why kilayim brings simcha, but people would wear, they'd mix wool and linen, and somehow there's a heter for that. Again, we're not going to discuss that today, but another problematic issue. The Ramah says, don't worry about it on Purim. Basically, anything goes. So that's the Ramah.
That's an Isser. I just want to be clear. That's an Isser deraisa that you're violating.
Yeah, sorry. So Rabinovitch is kilayim derabanan. So he only allows derabanan kilayim. Meaning, if you wear kilayim dioraisa, he would not allow it. And what we're saying by the cross-dressing is you're not violating an Isser dioraisa because you're not doing it for the intention of beautification. You're actually not doing the Isser at all. Now, what's the story with kilayim? We're not going to go into today. Why there's a heter for that.
What is kilayim derabanan?
So in order for kilayim to be dioraisa, it needs to be shua talui v'nuz. If I had a clue what exactly that meant, it's some sort of method of twisting the fibers together. I've never done any fiber work, so I don't really know what it means. But if you mix them together, let's say you make a knot between some wool and linen, but you don't twist them together, so that would be kilayim derabanan and not dioraisa. Good. So that's the Ramah. As you can imagine, not everyone was so happy with this. Have you guys ever seen this? I know I have. I think I've seen a few times people, wearing opposite gendered clothes on Purim. No, Dr. Griffith says no.
I've never seen
One of my teachers showed me a picture yesterday of him from a few years ago, dressed up as a woman.
Okay, there you go. So it's an old minhag. So I'm just making sure it exists. Your name is Mordechai, right?
Yeah,
Mordechai.
I'm Mordechai.
Okay, thank you, Mordechai. You're playing prominently in this coming Megillah coming up. Okay, fine. So it is most definitely something that some people do. I don't know how prominent it is, but this minhag goes back. The Ramah says it's fine. Don't worry about it. Based on this Mari Mintz. Here's the problem. The Mari Mintz did not have every single Rishon in front of him, and the Bach gets upset because there's a Yereim. Who's the Yereim? I don't have enough detail about the Yereim. What I can tell you about the Yereim is he's always machber, just about. The Yereim, Yereim really means the fearful one. So, he named his sefer quite apropos. If that's a word, it's not. But the name of the sefer is quite appropriate. He is left and right machmir, and interestingly, I'm learning Hilchos Shabbos now. Just about every single area of Hilchos Shabbos, he's machmir against the minhag. The minhag is X, but I think it doesn't make sense based on the Gemaras. We should be machmir. That's the Yereim. But we paskin like a lot of the Yereim. So what happens? So there's this Yereim over here, quoted by the Bach, about Harav Eliezer Mimitz, B'Sefer Yereim, Simon Tzadi Bab, Kasav Zelashon. So he talks about a different case. He's not talking about Purim, but he's talking about changing garments, cross-dressing in general. Hilkach, Zaher Adam Shelo Yitakin Atzma B'Tikunei Nashim. You shouldn't wear women's clothing. You should make sure that your men's clothes are different than women's clothes. Okay, etc. He goes on talking about why you shouldn't wear them. Here, Vilo Bosh, beginning of the line. Vilo Bosh afilu arai. Even if you're going to wear it just as a one-time thing, v'derech schok, and for some humorous purposes, aser. It's still aser. Sharei lo chilek hakasu ben keval arai. The psukim never tell you, is there a distinction between whether you're doing it for permanent reasons, Are you always wearing this or just a one-time thing? Since I see some people once in a while wearing cross-dressing, when would people do this? Not during Purim, but apparently at at the weddings. So you get dressed up for shtick. So the men would dress up like women and the women would dress up like men. That's when the Araim would see this and he thinks it's terrible. So I'm writing this to go and say how terrible this is. People shouldn't be doing it. So the Bach basically says, once we have this Yeraim, there's no room to be makil like the Maharimins. He says, just jumping to the bold, this is the Bach talking the Dvarav Bazeh, that the Maharimins' words are Dechuyim Hema Mimashikasav Rabbi Lezer Mimins Lahed. He's explicitly against the Rabbi Lezer Mimins from the Yeraim. He says, Ve'in Safik She'ilu Lo Hayune Elami Mashikasav Rabbi Lezer Mimins Bazeh. From Rabbi Yehuda Mimins, Lo Hayakosiv King. Had he known about the Yeraim, there's not a chance he would have published his tshuva. He would have backed out and said, I'm wrong. So how does the Bach deal with those Tosfos though? I mean, Tosfos at the end of the day said that you're allowed to go and use a mirror to get a haircut, and you're allowed to go and use a mirror to give yourself a haircut. So maybe I'll ask you, how would you distinguish between those cases and the Purim case of cross-dressing and if you wanted to say cross-dressing is usher, so why still would you be allowed to use a mirror? What's the difference?
To save your life.
Right. So what the Bach says is, if you're preventing harm from yourself, right? Meaning even when you're giving yourself a haircut, you're allowed to do it. So probably you won't be saving your life there, but it's going to be a pretty bloody haircut if you're using a razor and no mirror. So to prevent tsar, to protect yourself, says the Bach, that's when you're allowed to go and violate lo yilbash. That's not a violation of prohibition. But here, when you're cross-dressing, you're trying to look like the opposite sex. That is the Isser itself. So Bach gets very upset by this. And not surprisingly, Rav Ovadia has a tshuva. Again, who was the one who quoted this Maharimins? It was the Ramah, right? So the Ramah is the posek for the Ashkenazim. So Rav Ovadia, who is the Sephardi posek of the last generation, one of the big issues he dealt with was that the Sephardim were very influenced by the Ashkenazi psakim. The Sephardim were, there was a lack of, in Israel especially, they were unfortunately like second-class citizens, and they picked up a lot of the Ashkenazi minhagim because they didn't have enough, not sure what the right word is, confidence in their own piskei halacha, and they started picking up things from the Ashkenazim. Rav Ovadia's big thing was to go and bring back la hachazir, to go bring the crown back to its glory of Sephardi minhagim and Sephardi psak. So Rav Ovadia, left and right, is upset by Ashkenazi minhagim, which had found their way into the Sephardi community. So he has a whole tshuva about this Maharimins, that the Sephardim now even are cross-dressing on Purim, and he says, first of all, we don't paskin like the Ramah, we're Sephardim, not Ashkenazim, and second of all, the Bach's right. So of course you shouldn't cross-dress, and he gets very upset about this. If you look in the Mishnah Brura, he's a little bit more, even-handed. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. The way Rav Rimon, Yosef Tzvi Rimon, whose Sfarim we've been quoting a lot this year, comes out is that if you're just wearing one skirt or one garment, let's say, so then there's a lot more room to be makel, because there are poskim who think one garment, when it's still clear who you are, isn't a problem of lo yilbash. And even if you're completely wearing something different, you're totally dressed up like the opposite gender. So then you have the Ramah at least to rely on. He says maybe it should be avoided, but there's definitely yesh al midli smoke. You have room to be makel. Okay, again, ask Rabbi Levine or your local Orthodox rabbi for guidance if you decide to get dressed up as something wacky this Purim or next year, Dr. Gribbets, when you change your mind and decide you want to start dressing up on Purim. So we have 15 minutes, which is good because I want to talk about another minhag of Purim. We'll see if this actually connects back to the issue of cross-dressing, because the Maharimins is going to end up quoting this. So as background, let's actually just jump in. What's the Ramah say over here? I put it on the underline. This whole Ramah basically in Siman Tafish Sadivav is explaining all the things which we do which seem like they're usher on Purim, so don't worry about it. That's basically this Ramah. But he has one line here which I want to discuss for a little bit. He says, V'chein b'nei adam hachotfim ze mizeh derech simcha. Similarly, people who grab items from each other, that's another word for steal, people who steal items from one another, derech simcha. I don't know, your good friend thinks it's funny when he takes your books away from you. I'm not sure why this is. Maybe I'm just too much of a litvak. I'm not sure what the problem is with me, but apparently this brings a lot of simcha when you steal people's stuff, and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't find my keys." So that's really funny, and you don't have to worry about that. Ein bazeh mishum lo sigzol. Don't worry, that's not stealing. It's really stealing. No, it's not stealing. That's basically what the Ramah says. V'nahagu kach, and that's the minhag. Uvad shlo yaseh davar shlo kehogen al pi tuvei ha'ir. So here's an interesting line he throws in. You can't do something so terrible that the tuvei ha'ir, basically they used to have, designated people to make decisions for the Jewish like council, so to speak, for the city. So if you steal someone's car, that might not be as appreciated as if you steal his pencils. So you're allowed, there's some leeway here on Purim to go and bring an environment of simcha to the day, that you're allowed to go and take some stuff from your friend, haha, very funny, and that's not a problem of lo sigzol. You don't have to worry about it, and all is good. So where does that come from? So there's actually pretty decent sources for this one. Has anyone, by the way, before I continue, because this one I really never heard of, is that like such a minhag, like steal stuff from other people? You can't find your car keys on Purim? Maybe it is a thing. No. Okay. On Simchas Torah, we used to tie people's tzitzis together.
That I remembered, but
yeah, that's a real.
But never the stealing part.
No. I don't think about that either. And I figured out tying tzitzis is a whole. Not everyone's happy about tying tzitzis. Maybe you can't tie tzitzis, but.
Chodfin reminds me of stealing the matzah. It's the same language.
Right. Oh, good. So stealing matzah is a good parallel case, right? So there's a discussion also in poskim, we're obviously mekel, but some poskim have said it's bad chinuch. You're teaching your kids to steal. There's more room to be mekel over there because they're your kids and you're basically asking them to do it. Like we'll have to discuss. Maybe like, what's the understanding here? How on earth could you do this? Why is it not lo sigzol? Like what's the understanding that all of a sudden we just get rid of Yisurin?
Because they return it.
Oh, he's going to return it. So it happens to be, Dr. Gribbets, if I steal your car and I return it the next day, you might not appreciate that in general, right? Meaning,
I appreciate it, but I don't think you're a thief.
Okay, I hear. So they're not saying it's not even a problem. Like you can do this. So why am I allowed to do this? You wouldn't generally appreciate if I stole something and gave it back a few hours later. What's the understanding of this?
You have the intention of returning it.
Right, but still, if I take your shirt and I intend to return it, so you wouldn't say, "Oh, it's okay. I don't mind when you take my things for a few hours." If you needed that thing,
It's in the spirit of the day for simcha.
Oh, good. So it's in the spirit of the day. So what does that mean? Meaning it's in the spirit of the day and therefore
it's not considered stealing.
Okay, good. So it's not considered stealing. So you could take, I think, two approaches. Let me say just one approach right now and we'll work with that. I would have said that there's an implicit mechila. Like the person who you're stealing from wants there to be this sense of simcha. And because they want there to be the sense of simcha, so everyone just says, I'm mochel, you can do whatever you want, which is going to add to that, spirit of the day. Now that would also explain why you can't do something so terrible that the city council would think you're a terrible person, like steal someone's, Corvette or something like that. That would be inappropriate. So that's what I would have said. And I think that we can work with that for a moment. We'll see if maybe there's another explanation. So if you look in the Mishnah in Sukkah, there's a similar idea, similar to Pesach, like we said. But the Mishnah in Sukkah says that on the last day of Sukkot, everyone's taking their lulav and their esrog. So miyad tinokos shomtinas lulavehem, the ochlin esrogehem. All of a sudden on the last day, so you could read this two ways, right? What does the word miyad mean? Anyone want to translate miyad?
From the
Or
hands,
miyad?
from the hands up.
From the hands up. Beautiful. So that's one possibility. What's another translation of miyad?
Immediately.
Good.
Immediately.
Exactly. So you could read this two ways. Now Tosfos, which we're not going to see, I didn't put this on the source sheet, but Tosfos says that it means immediately. That's his second explanation. It says that immediately, once everyone's fulfilled their mitzvos, tinokos shomtinas lulavehen, the kids would drop their lulavim, the ochlin esrogein, and then we'd eat their, I don't know, that was the minhag. They'd drop their things and everyone would take them. So no stealing involved. That was just the minhag. you'd end up, the kids would give away their etrogim and the lulavim. But the way which Rashi reads this over here, and we'll see, Tosfos says the same possibility, is miyad is in from the hands of. So from the hands of the tinokos, we take away their lulavim and we eat their esrogim. So not a very nice thing to do, you would think, but we basically steal the kids' esrogim and lulavs, we'd eat the esrog, and it would be a great day. And says Rashi, you don't have to worry about stealing, and you don't have to worry about causing machlokas. Because very similar language to what we have by Purim, because it's actually learned from here. But that's the minhag based on, we want to create a sense of simcha on Sukkot, so that's why this is fine. And Tosfos then expands this and he says, they used to have much more exciting weddings than we have. Ours might be much more expensive, but they had great shtick. What would they do? They would have bachurim riding on horses to go and meet the chassan. And they would like fight with each other. They joust on horses, instead of Ketzan Meraktim Lifnei Akala, you get two guys on actual horses go at each other with javelins. So quite the shtick. The Korin Bigdol Shel Chavero. And what happens if you rip up the other guy's shirt? Or you break the other guy's, the other person's horse is, you hurt the horse. Shein P'turim. They don't have to pay anything. Shekach Nagu Machma Simchas Chasan. Because that's the minhag based on Simchas Chasan. You can't bring the guy to court and say, hey, why'd you tear my clothes? Why'd you hurt my horse? No, that's part of the simcha. That's part of the the spirit of the day of the chasen, and therefore, again, I think we can explain this way that everyone is mochel. Everyone just says, you know what, whatever you do, I'm good with it. We're trying to create an ambiance of simcha, of happiness, of excitement, and therefore you're good to go. So that ends up being taken to Purim. The same thing is true by Purim. If you take someone's stuff on Purim and that creates a sense of simcha, the Ramah says it's mutter. Again, I don't know when this would come up. Maybe you guys can think of an example. I really don't know. Again, haha is only funny when it actually is. But also another point is that the person has to have implicit mechila, what we're saying, right? The person has to be like, I'm happy with everyone to steal. So that might only make sense in a place where that's the norm. If I'm expecting everyone to steal little things from me, so then, I'm mochel. But if I've never heard of this minhag, like I'd never heard of this minhag, it sounds like no one else here has either. So there presumably is not an implicit mechila. It's okay if you steal my stuff. I didn't even know people were stealing stuff. I just, there's nothing funny about that. But that's this Ramah. So what's interesting though is that the Mahari Mintz, if you get back to the Mahari Mintz brings this as a proof to why you're allowed to cross-dress. And that's very strange. So he quotes this idea about stealing on Purim, and that it's okay to steal on Purim. And he says, let's start from the underline here in source 6. There's no problem of stealing on Purim. But before Purim and afterwards, obviously that's a problem. You shouldn't steal when it's not Purim. You shouldn't steal on Purim probably either. And you violate lo sigzol. So on Purim, because of the simcha of the day, it's not a problem of gezel. Since you're doing it for the purpose of creating simcha, it's allowed. So here's where it gets, this is where we're gonna have to figure out how he understands this head there. Going back to our cross-dressing thing, he says, so too by our cross-dressing, loshna is not a problem. You're not trying to do anything, adulterous here. You're trying to do it in order to bring about simcha on Purim, etc. And then he goes on to say why he thinks that, Gzela and Arayos have a similarly Eitzar Hara. It's a little bit of a drasha. But here's the problem, right? What were we saying? We were saying that because of the simcha of the day, there's an implicit mechila. So I mochel you, if you steal a little bit, that's okay. So the problem is, then how does the Mahari Mintz say, oh, that means you're allowed to cross-dress? Right? By cross-dressing, there's no mechila here to talk about, right? Mechila is only something relevant when there's an aggrieved party that the aggrieved party can tell you, okay, I forgive you. So how does he then say, oh, therefore, since I mochel people to go and make simcha, therefore I can violate isurim of cross-dressing? Like what does one thing have anything to do with the other? You hear the question?
Just saying that it overrides the halacha because
Yes, right. If you're able to override the gzeler as a thief, so you're also able to override the crossing.
Okay, good. So you're basically both saying this the different than I was saying. I was saying it's not that you're overriding anything. There's mechila. If you say you're allowed to take my thing, so then it's not stealing when I take your thing. But you're both saying not that way. You're saying no, you are doing zela. You are stealing. But there's this overriding sense of simcha, which you're trying to create, which allows you to even violate halacha, or the way that Lichtenstein put it was that they didn't make their gzeras. Chazal didn't want to make any gzeras when there were, or they didn't enforce they didn't enforce the halacha on Purim in order to create a sense of simcha, right? So the same way, meaning really it is gzela. No one's being mochel you at all. But Chazal said, we're not enforcing anything. Do what you want because we're trying to create an ambiance of simcha, and for that reason, they didn't ban stealing. For the same reason, we're not going to say that there's a problem of cross-dress. So he ends up with two different arguments, right? To be makel. The first is this isn't a problem at all, right? That's what he did at the beginning. Anything that men and women do equally is not a problem of lo yilbash beged, lo yilbash gever simlas isha. And the other heter he's saying is even if it is aser, well, on Purim, basically anything goes. Now, obviously, there's limits to that. You're definitely not allowed to murder, or we got to figure out and that's where that key line comes in. You can't do anything which the Tuvei Ha'ir think is inappropriate. Where the Jewish City Council, will make decisions on whether how bad this is.
And to be clear, it's not so certain that you can kill people on Purim.
That you cannot kill people on Purim?
It's not so clear. We learned a Gemara that's exactly what happened.
That's right. I mean, he was totally drunk, but Rabbi killed Rabbi Zera. So you got to figure out, first of all, is that literal or is that metaphorical? And secondly, I don't think anyone was telling him it was okay what he did, but he was so drunk he didn't even intend to do it. There's actually
he just knew it was not a good idea to go back the next year for Suda.
Right. No, he actually wanted to. He said, let's go again. And the other person said, I'm not sure this is a good idea.
Exactly.
What about idolatry?
Don't do that. That's for sure. We're not pro-idolatry.
Even for simcha?
Even for simcha. I don't know anyone who's been matir simcha. The way it works with these things is that they really start as minhagim. And then once that's the minhag, so then we say it's okay. But you can't have I'm telling you, eating a cheeseburger would definitely bring a lot of simcha. But we're not saying on Purim you're allowed to do that. Maybe we'll just finish outside. There was a tshuva of the Shumas Hadeshin. He was asked, someone was trying to be makel based on this heter. The guy jumped on top of his friend on Purim and dislocated his shoulder. So the guy brought him to court. And then the Shumas Hadeshin says basically, we'd be makel because the guy was doing it for Simchas Purim. He was doing leapfrog or something like that. But then it came out that the guy who jumped on, let's say Reuven jumped on Shimon. So it came out that Reuven actually had a long-standing grudge against Shimon and has hated Shimon for the past 10 years. And it just happens to be he jumped on Shimon's, back and dislocated his shoulder. So Shumas Hadeshin says, no. Like you can't just use this as do whatever you want kind of thing. And the Shumas Hadeshin says we have to make him pay so that people don't start thinking you can do whatever you want on Purim. So I think Purim probably used to be a little bit more leibadik. That seems to be my conclusion from the sources. People used to do a lot more interesting things than we do, but it's all part of this general feel of Purim, which we're supposed to try and create. That's probably what's behind the drinking also, maybe at least part of it. Not that I'm telling you to drink again, but that at least was part of what drinking was about. Purim's a day which is just the way the Brisker Rav put it, is that on Yom Tov, the goal of Yom Tov is to have simcha in order to become closer to Hashem. Like it's supposed to be a conduit to get closer to Hashem. On Purim, there's an end in itself to have simcha. My goal is to be in a happy state of mind, do what you can to be happy, and we'll let certain things slide to go and make that happen. So don't let too much slide, but maybe a little bit is all right. And it's been a pleasure. Mitzvah Hashem, who knows when the next year will be, but I really enjoyed learning with everyone.
We very much look forward.
Thank you.
Okay, Purim Sameach
Purim
Gam
Sameach. Thank you.
and Gam Pesach.
and Pesach. Yeah, it's true.
Because
We'll see.
Like,